What is the self explored with tarot? My name is Joe Monteleone. I am a modern mystic, bona fide misfit, and total fool, and I am touring the teleology of tarot for the truly curious. So please take what I say with an existential grain of salt, because you know you're going to need it if you're watching one of my videos. So my favorite suit in the tarot is the suit of swords, and that's because the suit of swords is the ego. It is the infinite feedback loop between self and other. Why is that? Because what do swords do? They separate. Just like the mind separates and discriminates. It is the mind that allows things to exist by allowing an idea of what they are and what they are not. I am looking at a camera. It is a camera because I identify it as a camera, and everything else that is around it is not a camera. And the discriminatory capacity of my mind allows for that camera to exist. I believe the tarot itself, going through the majors and further analyzed by the minors, talks about these sort of separations of extremes which allow things to exist. The relationship of fire and water, the relationship of air and earth, the relationship of 1 through 10, the tree of life, the elements, the signs, the modes in astrology. They are all creating relationships through progress and in a cyclical fashion, because the tarot is a wheel. T-A-R-O is tarot. And when you play with those letters, you get rota, wheel. The tarot is the wheel of the universe. So coming back to the suit of swords and exploring the question, what am I? What am I? Knowing what you are is a pretty big deal, apparently. It was the motto of the Pythia back in ancient Greece, and I actually believe it's kind of a fun riddle, because I believe that to know thyself is impossible, because it is the very question that allows for reality to exist. It's kind of like the answer that you're searching for is actually the question which prompted the search to begin with, which is why manifestation is happening. In the Sefer Yetzirah, it talks about breath. Breath from breath, water from breath, and fire from water. The breath is this infinitude, this spirit, this intelligence, or this substratum of being from which comes everything. And when it's talking about breath from breath, it's talking about the breath that ricochets from that breath. In Kaplan's commentary on the Sefer Yetzirah, he talks about this as if you're blowing into a bottle, and the breath that is coming into the bottle is God, is consciousness, and the breath that is ricocheting around the bottle is, in some way, at least how I interpret it, us. And that is the suit of swords, because the suit of swords is the feedback loop, is the ricochet, is the bouncing around of energies that have started in the relationship between the suit of wands and the suit of cups. So the suit of wands and cups, fire and water, that's our Hermetic marriage. That is our masculine and feminine, not gender, but energy, positive and negative, coming together to create the world. We see this in Tantra and in the East, and with Shiva Shakti. We see this with Yin Yang. We see it everywhere. We see it in code, in the binary of zeros and ones. We see it in the relationship between the fool and the magician, and we see it in the relationship between the magician and the high priestess. It is this constant ricochet that creates the pinball game of experience, activity, and honestly, a damn good time. Life itself. It is what keeps the wheel of fortune moving and spinning in all of its horror and glory. In the Sefer Yetzirah, it says the voice of breath and speech. Breath being this infinite consciousness, voice being the fuel for the articulation of speech. Now, in a lot of mysticism, language is used as a metaphor to describe manifestation, separation, and being. And I believe that is because these mystical texts are so existential in terms of consciousness and the human experience that they are connecting to our memory as a species of learning to communicate. It is like it's talking about the moment in our evolutionary past when we could signify and communicate and make words and begin a civilization. And that's very apt to the suit of swords, being that the suit of swords is the mind and is the discriminating intelligence of the mind and is language itself, as well as technology and all things that have to do with labels and the matrix. All things that are allowed by the magician, who is Mercury, who is air, who is the messenger of the gods, Hermes, Mercury, Thoth. So in the tree of life, we have breath from breath. Breath being Keter, the source of everything up on the top, and Malkuth, the bottom, being the second breath. The second breath is an echo of the first and the last, the Alpha and the Omega. Keter is the beginning, the truth, the source, and Malkuth is the response. In the words Aheya, Asher Aheya, I am that I am. This is God's response to Moses asking the burning bush, what the hell are you? What is going on here? I am that I am. Aheya, I am, is that first sephira. The rest of the sephira together are Yod He Vav He, the sacred name of God. And the last sephira is Adonai, Lord. This last sephira is the breath from the breath that was started above. So we are a ricochet of that breath, an echoing of that breath. And this is also echoed in the Hermetic axiom, as above, so below. So the way that the elements come into play is they illustrate this through 40 cards. The source being the aces and the final result, the final echoes, being the tens. Notice that in the tens of the tarot and the Rider-Waite-Smith, there is some allusion to civilization. In the Ten of Pentacles, we have this rich patriarch or family or business or city. In the Ten of Cups, we have a happy family. In the Ten of Swords, we have the death of somebody or betrayal, the horrors of war. In the Ten of Wands, we have somebody hard at work or being overwhelmed by their job, their duty. All things that are coming together in the kingdom in all of its horror and glory. That's very important because we're looking at the echo, the reflection of breath. And with free will, we can choose either way. Coming back to the Suit of Swords, that infinite choice, the binary of one or the other, free will. So in the Suit of Swords, we have the I am reflected in ourselves as a module of the higher intelligence, of the higher universe, as it is funneled through the Hermetic marriage of fire and water. Fire would be light and expansion, the creative spark of the universe, the fire that created everything, the flames on the very Hebrew letters, water being the vessels that receive that light and begin to create form. And so it goes back and forth until that feedback loop is the Suit of Swords. Now, the ego itself, from a Freudian perspective, would be the fulcrum point between the superego and the id being the inner baby self that just craves and wants stuff, and the superego being the higher self. The ego balances the two to create a being. And this is why in the Western mystery traditions, the ruach is actually the ego. The ruach is also a word for breath. So it is both the breath of spirit, but also the mind, the ego, as it reflects the higher breath. Now, just because I love a good cyberpunk fantasy, I'm going to connect it to some of my favorite novels. So in certain dystopian fantasy, they use the word pneumatic to describe technology. These authors use pneumatic because pneuma is spirit or breath, and pneumatic is used because it describes the air-powered technology that is sending or receiving messages, for example. So if somebody in the dystopian novel is getting a message through a pipe, or if it's a steampunk vibe, we have this pressurized air, and then that is described as pneumatic. Let's go a little further. So pneumatic air pipes, pneumatic pressure, air, wind, these are things that are invisible but can be felt when they are moving, which is why the tarot is moving. This is why everything is in motion in the ocean, sun in the sky to experience itself. You know I love that paradigm. The result of this feedback loop, and I want to even say fractalization of air as it is ricocheting out of the infinite breath of God, the creator source, is to realize itself in matter, and that's when the mind deciphers and discriminates different sensory data to create things. So that shows us that the four suits are the process of creation, but human-centric creation. We have this light, the beginning of the life force. We have the cups, which is the receiving, the energy coming into vessels. We have the air, the swords, which is the feedback loop and the development of the ego, and how that ego projects and through that feedback loop creates self, otherness, and other things, realized in the Suit of Pentacles in stuff, money, bodies. And so we get three I ams. We have the I am above, which is everything. We have the I am of the ego, and then we have the I am of what we are manifesting below in Malkuth. Ultimately, it's all one I am. That's kind of the riddle of it all. I am are two of the most powerful words, and with intention, you can be anything. And that's the point. Thanks for tuning into this ramble. Contemplate, cognize, and comment your thoughts below. If you liked it, please share it. Let me know your thoughts. Subscribe, and I will see you in the next wormhole. Much love.